we go! Here we go! Here we go!
We're gonna have a fiery Sterling today.
Well, no, you just have a big old air horn, and anytime a Packers fan tries to talk, you just hit the button and drown them out. Like, no, I can't hear you. Go Bears.
It's basically the la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Right? You don't even have to live there. You can do it from here. Just remote control everything. Yeah, I'm pissed off, man. Fuck the NFL at this point.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the OneIQ Football Talk podcast, here for yet another week of content. Again, if you missed one of the videos coming out earlier on Saturday afternoon, we are breaking up a lot of stuff for content, giving you more videos throughout the week and a little bit shorter content, so please make sure to go check that out. But as per usual, Sterling, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing good, man. I mean, week 2 was good for me. I didn't get to watch as much football as I wanted, but I still got to see my Steelers win again. So I'm happy that way. And we got week 3 underway. A lot of big games tomorrow. So looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, week number 2 was an insane week of football because we had 7 upsets and 6 complete upsets. Basically, what I mean by that is the spread, the team that upset in terms of the money line and the spread situation. Not only did they win the spread bet, but they actually won if they were the favorites. So like, say for instance, minus 3 points, the team that was the underdog in that game, they won by more than 3 points in that one. So a total basically shocker there. So we had 6 of those, but we had 7 just pure upsets throughout this week, which was absolutely crazy to talk about. Because again, if you would have told me that the New Orleans Saints would have beaten the Dallas Cowboys 44-19, I would have looked at you and said, okay, no.
Right.
Like if you would have told me like, oh hey, the New Orleans Saints won the game off of a last second field goal and it was like 22-21, I would have been like, wow, that must have just been an absolute defensive battle. Like, good for the Saints to go out there and do that. Bad for the Cowboys. But the fact that the Saints basically just said, we know we beat up the handicap kid that is the Carolina Panthers. And that's really what they are at this point. They really are. But the fact that they basically said, it was literally that SpongeBob meme where it was the Saints going, you want to see me do it again?
Yeah.
And they just did that. It was insane.
This time they beat up on the homeschool kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They beat up on the jacked homeschool kid. Is what that happened. And we saw an upset for the Bucks and Lions. Again, the Packers over the Colts in that particular game. The Vikings over the 49ers. That was a big one. We saw the Browns beat the Jags. The Raiders beat the Ravens in overtime. The Cardinals absolutely dismantling the Rams. So that's actually kind of one of the things that I want to talk about, is because last week you kind of brought this idea up that you're like, oh, this Cardinals team, they might be able to do a little bit of something. And then I basically just came in and said, no, like, shut up, like, stop that. And I gotta give you the props on that one. You walked out there and called it, and 100% truth on that one. It was the Cardinals. They shocked not just me, but I think the entire NFL world.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting the Rams to fall that flat. I thought it was going to be much more competitive, but knowing who Marvin Harrison Jr. is and who his dad is, you had to know it wasn't going to be more than a couple of weeks before he finally arrived.
Yeah.
And Kyler Murray, he looked good in week 1, and I thought that's all that was missing from that game, was him making that connection with Marvin Harrison. And then as soon as they did, it was like the cheat code unlocked. That achievement bar popped up, and it's like, oh, easy touchdown mode. Okay, here we go. And that's sort of what happened for the the Cardinals at that point. They just went off, and that's dangerous going forward now. Now that Kyler Murray can see that, as long as they can keep the new Call of Duty away from him at the end of October, then this Cardinals team could be very good by the end of the season. I think my concern right now is until we see that happen, like him not have that fall off with a new Call of Duty coming out. Now, if you've got Kyler Murray, it's fire sale time. Like now is a good time. You're going to get great value in your fantasy league if you want to throw him out there and try and get something back for him. His value is there right now. Once Call of Duty comes out, that could be a concern. We see him drop off sometimes.
I hate the fact that we have to look at an NFL player who is as talented as Kyler Murray. But when the new Call of Duty game comes out, it's one of those things where it's like, and we see it's like you see those graphics where it's like, oh, he's up here, and it's like a little bit of a maybe a little bit of a down, and then Call of Duty, it's absolutely insane. It's laughable, honestly. It's just so batshit crazy, man. But again, this Rams team, injuries are what's really kicking this team in the ass. They are down in the dumps right now. Again, we knew Puka Nacua, he got hurt week number 1. It was okay. You still have,
Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, you still have Cooper Kupp. Like you're gonna be perfectly set with that. And then week number 2, Cooper Kupp goes down, and you're looking at this Rams team going, okay, who do you got? It's like we have Kyron Williams and Blake Corum, who we haven't used, and you just continuing to go like, so you really just have Kyron Williams. Yeah. How's your defense looking? Yeah.
We have one of those. Yeah.
It's young. It's young.
Yeah.
Are you guys feeling the actual loss of Aaron Donald? Do you need a tissue? Yeah. Yeah. And this poor Rams team, man, because I kind of had this feeling with the Rams after week number 1 with the Lions, where I sat back and I went, man, this Rams team is going to be a playoff team, and they are going to be one of the best teams in the NFL. Sure, they lost Puka Nacua. That's a tough one. Once he's back, this team is just going to be unstoppable. But after this Cardinals game, I'm looking at this team going, okay, like here are the Rams' next couple of games. They have to play the 49ers. That's not going to be an easy test. They then have to go to Chicago to play the Bears. And again, we know what the Bears defense is like. And if the Bears can get things going up against this Colts team, and Caleb Williams can walk away into this next home game with confidence after, like, let's say Caleb Williams has a 3-touchdown game, throws for like 300 yards, and just plays kind of like what we expected him to be. I know I'm kind of preaching hope here, and I see you smile, but let's just say that is the case. The Rams going to Chicago with the defense playing the way that it is, and that, you can't say that the Rams are going to be a comfortable team to pick in that game. Like this Rams team could very easily lose that game as well. That puts them to 0-4. Let's say Jordan Love the week after that for the Packers is now officially back, because every single week it's going, oh, he's questionable. He's not going to play this week, but who knows? Maybe they just say fuck it and throw him out there. They're not winning against the Packers. Then guess what? You have the Raiders. If the Raiders continue to play and continue to grow and develop, and Gardner Minshew just continues to play with that confidence, you are now 6-0. Then guess what? You have another tough matchup against the Vikings. If Sam Darnold and the Vikings team continues to do what they're doing, you are now 0-7. Then you have the Seahawks. I don't think they're necessarily as good of a team as they could, so that could be a good game because it's divisional. But you could genuinely be walking into trade deadline week 1-7, 0-8. That is what could potentially be happening right there. And if you're the Rams and you go to that trade deadline 2-6, 1-7, 0-8, that type of situation, it's time to start sending some people away and going, yep, it's... I saw an interesting trade proposal this week that involved 3 teams. It was the Panthers, it was the Rams, and I forget the other team.
Dolphins.
And the Dolphins. So the Dolphins get Matthew Stafford. the Rams get Bryce Young, which I look at that and I go, that would actually be a really good trade for kind of everyone involved, because the Panthers get a second and a third round pick to play with, which adding more draft capital, and you at this point you're going to be the worst team in the league.
Yeah.
You're going to have the first overall pick, so you'll be able to kind of figure out what you're going to do. You're not going to have to trade up to get this first overall pick, so you'll have choice at quarterback. Let's see what Sean McVay can do with the slender man, or the midget slender man that is Bryce Young, and potentially trying to save the season while trying to move some stuff, and the Dolphins get Matthew Stafford for the playoff push. And I just, this Rams team, man, it could really spiral out of control really, really quickly after a week 1 loss that we all sat back and said this team could be a very high-end playoff squad.
Well, and it comes down to the injuries, though. Like that's the thing, is it can change a team so drastically, just a few injuries. And you're right, if we reach trade deadline week and they're sitting bottom of their division, bottom 3 in the conference, bottom 5 in the league, you got to, and then you look at what the diagnosis is on Nakua and Cup at that point, and you go, well, are we going to have them both back at 100% next week? If so, then you go, okay, we could still climb out of this and finish above 500. They are good enough if everybody's there and healthy. But if you look at that and go, well, we're not getting Puka back until week 12, we're not getting Cup back until week 15. At that point, yeah, it's how much can we get for Matthew Stafford? That trade made me laugh hysterically because I saw it too. Because I'm looking at that going, how Carolina Panthers is that? You spent the number 1 overall pick, and all you can get back for it is a second and a third rounder. Not even another. You can't even flip that for a top 10 pick now, let alone a first round pick. It's a second rounder and a third rounder. It's so sad.
They might be getting too much value in that, honestly.
Right?
Because again, we talk about Bryce Young, and again, we haven't mentioned in at least this portion of the podcast. We mentioned it in our game picks video. Bryce Young was benched this week. Andy Dalton is the starting quarterback, and I think Dave Canellis walked into this team and he was basically told, fix Bryce Young. And after 2 games, he went, it's not fixable. It's not something I can do. I was able to work with Geno Smith. I was able to work with Baker Mayfield. I can't fix this. And you know, one of the biggest stats that I saw this week is Bryce Young had, I think, 29 dropbacks.
Yeah.
He had 4 pressures.
4 pressures.
And he had, like, I'll read out the game that he had in week number 2. It was utterly embarrassing.
It was horrendous.
This game, Bryce Young on 26 dropbacks, I should state, he had 84 yards, an interception, and 2 sacks.
4 pressures.
Yeah. Again, this is against a Chargers team that we all view as being a fairly, very strong unit. They had 4 pressures. They spent on 2 guards this offseason where they spent over $100 million to bring in to give Bryce Young more time to do that. And again, you just look at this team. Again, going after and getting Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt, ensuring that Bryce Young would be protected. He was protected. Yeah. He couldn't do anything. They had to bench him.
They did. And we'll see this week. Like, if Andy Dalton is able to come in there and go off, then we truly know that Bryce Young is the issue, and he is not NFL ready at this point. That being said, I've seen a lot of, practice clips, training clips of this Panthers team, and the play calling is an issue as well.
Oh,
when
totally.
you've got Adam Thielen running jet sweep plays, you have a problem. You do, like, why? Did you let Matt Canada into the room? Like, why are you running jet sweeps with Adam Thielen? No.
Just
So I
absolutely
mean, there's
stupid.
issues all through, but if Andy Dalton can find a way to score a touchdown, already that's an improvement
Yeah,
because this Panthers team cannot do that. Like we talk about how bad the Steelers offense has looked and some of the other offenses have looked.
like the Bears.
It's still not 84 yards, 2 sacks, and an interception bad on 4 pressures. That basically means 3 of those 4 pressures resulted in a net loss,
Yeah,
whether it's a sack or a turnover.
yeah,
And that is horrible, especially when you look at someone like Caleb Williams, who back a week ago got pressured. How many times you said it was like 29 or something like
34.
that? 34. And, he only had, what was it, the 1 or the 2 interceptions?
He
But
had he had the 2 interceptions. Yeah,
that was against a very good defense, though. And so that's
and he also got sacked 7 times.
right. Yeah, that's something else we got to talk about is that Bears O-line.
We are definitely gonna be talking
Yeah.
about that here in
But
this
yeah, this
podcast.
Panthers team, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Like it was less than a decade ago that this Panthers organization was talked about being one of the best. They had Cam Newton, they had Christian McCaffrey, they had so much talent on that team.
Greg
Like they were
Olson, Luke
right. They
Kuechly,
were
they
going
were
to
a
the playoffs.
respectable organization. And then the owners of the Panthers said, "We're gonna sell the team." And then I'm forgetting the owner's name here at the moment, but mostly because he's just such a piece of shit that you don't even really want to think about it. He just came and said, "I'm gonna fuck this shit up."
Yeah.
But again,
And
I want to talk about the Panthers going up against the Saints as well, because these are the numbers that Bryce Young threw in that. He had 13 for 30, 161 yards, 2 interceptions, 4 sacks for 26 lost yards. So again, I don't know the actual pressure rate in that game because I didn't see the stats from that, but that's what he did up against the Saints. And then to go up against the Chargers and to do that when your offensive line basically said in week number 1, "Hey, buddy, our bad. We gave you a bad protection. We're not going to do this week." And you lay that type of situation, like he had to be benched. And
that O-line this week going up against arguably an even better defense. Like I know right now, technically looking at the stats, the Chargers are the better defense, but I think can agree that the Raiders defense by the end of this season will be one of the best in this league because they are so good in that front 7. And so they're going to get after Andy Dalton. Like it's going to be a ugly game. There's going to be more than 4 pressures coming from the Raiders. And so it has potential to be really messy again. Like, and if Andy Dalton puts up a similar stat line to what Bryce Young does, then you can look at it and go, okay, Bryce might not be the problem. It might be management and coaching. I don't put it on Dave Canales because we saw what he was able to do with Baker Mayfield.
He's been there for
he's
2
inheriting
weeks.
a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
It's like here's a literal dumpster fire, and here is a mug full of water for you to put it out with.
It's not even a mug full of water. It's a mug full of piss.
It's a shot, right? It's a shot glass.
Yeah.
And it's like, here, put this fire out. And
the Panthers basically said, "Here's our dumpster fire. Here's a mug full of gasoline. Put it out."
Yeah.
Like that. That's
exactly.
That's essentially what they're doing there. And I just look at Max Crosby. He had just an unbelievable that was a defensive player of the year type game that he had against the Ravens last week. And he's now looking at this team and the Panthers and going, "You have an even less mobile quarterback for me to go after." Sure, we talked about Aiden Hutchinson getting those 4.5 sacks last week against the Bucks. I would not be shocked if you were to sit me down and say, "I'm future you, Brendan. Max Crosby had 8 sacks in this game." I would probably go, yeah.
The Panthers are just that bad.
Yeah. Like this is one of those situations. Do you want to know how many plays Max Crosby didn't play last week?
None.
He played every single play. He did not come out for a single one.
No. Why would he? He's completely healthy. He's in the best shape he's been in.
Yeah.
It's not a situation where it's like a beat up Myles Garrett where his snap rate is reducing, you know, or even TJ Watt who's getting older, and they're like, well, we've got guys we can put in for a few plays. Max Crosby doesn't need to do that. He's at his peak right now and he's healthy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you leave him out there every fucking down at this point.
Yeah, it is utterly domination from that man, but
Right? Let him have some fun. Put him in at fullback every now and then. let him smack a few of the other defensive players around on a power run play or something. Just
Luke Getsy's
run
not
some
that
guys
intelligent to have fun. Luke Getsy's offense, there's no fun. No fun for Luke Getsy's offense. He's not that creative. He's not creative enough to do that. Like he's too busy eating crayons at the moment.
Right?
Like
screen pass to Max Crosby. Jet sweep for Max Crosby. I could see Getsy pulling shit like that out.
They would have to be so ahead in the score. Like it would have to be something like 30-0 going into halftime, and Max is just like, I want to, like, I saw what Travis Hunter did this week, you know, college football, he didn't leave, so like I don't want to leave. I'm gonna play every single down. I don't care what position you put me on offense for the second half. I am not leaving the game. I'm going to be on kick return. I'm going to be on punt return. I'm going to be like, I could see him making that argument. We're up 30-0. Yeah. What's the harm? Play me as a tight end. Like, yeah, sure. Why not at this point?
Right.
It would be just absolutely hilarious. But I've kind of stalled enough from talking about the Chicago Bears offensive line. And again, if you watch the previous video of my game review of the Chicago Bears, highly recommend going and watching. That's something that we're doing for both of our teams. Again, solo videos from us, just adding a little bit more content for you guys throughout the week. Typically going to be coming out anywhere from Sunday afternoon to Tuesday, just depending on when we, you know, actually film it, whether or not I'm too depressed to film it right after a game or not. And obviously depending on Sterling and your work schedule and just when you are able to personally get it out. But yeah, this offensive line is a problem, man. You know, in last night or in Thursday's game where the Patriots were taking on the Jets, I'm reading people talk about like, oh, you can't put Drake May behind this offensive line. They have 4 sacks given up. I tweeted out, I was like, the Bears offensive line, looking at that, those are rookie numbers. You got to raise those numbers up.
Yeah,
because again,
100%.
I need to find the tweet of how many pressures the Bears offensive line gave up in that game, because it was embarrassing. It was genuinely.
You know, I saw a funny meme this week with
36.
How many?
36.
That's ridiculous. Like, dude's running for his life. You know, which unfortunately looks just like the Bears of last year. You know, that meme of the two guys in the nooses, and one looks over and goes first time, like Justin Fields looking over at Caleb Williams going first time, while Caleb Williams is just crying his eyes out. It's like Justin Fields is like, yeah, get used to it, buddy.
I was so annoyed. Like, I tweeted out, all right, the Bears need to draft Will Campbell, tackle out of LSU. They need to sign Zach Martin. They need to sign Trey Smith and Drew Dahlman. Because at least if you do that, maybe they won't give up 36 pressures and 7 sacks in a game. Like, I would have to look at this, and I just go back and look at Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham. They're both former offensive linemen. And I just go, how have you not figured it out? And I understand Ryan Poles coming into the Chicago Bears job 3 seasons ago. He had an impossible task because he had one of the oldest rosters in the team, who had some of the most expensive cap in the team. He needed to move on from that. He needed to know if his young quarterback was good enough while having no weapons around him. So he had to go through a lot of different processes to figure out what this team was while rebuilding it. I understand that not everything is going to be hit all at once, but the lack of offensive linemen that have been brought, again, we have a top 10 pick in Darnell Wright, who I'm not willing to give up yet. He had a bad game against someone who has been described as a werewolf in Danielle Hunter. That is what Danielle Hunter has been described as an NFL player. Again, Darnell Wright, he's a young player. He's still going to grow and develop. I'm not willing to give up on him. But oh my God, like if that's like I'm just sitting back going like, how can you have not found a center? I have been, every single Bears fan has been basically screaming at the top of their lungs since Olin Kreutz retired back when, fuck if I even know when he retired. It was early 2010s or in that area. We've been screaming, find a center. Find a goddamn center. Because it's been just a rotating door of just clusterfuck. And Coleman Shelton, a guy that I looked at and went, you know what, for the Rams last year, he was serviceable. He gave up a few sacks, but you know what? He's a guy that is going to be someone who I can rely on going like, oh, he's going to go in. He's going to be able to at least do that. He can't do anything. Nate Davis, I still don't understand how he hasn't been cut yet. I just look at that, I go, it would be better to cut Nate Davis right now, save a bunch of the money that you have from, like, hell, just say we'll give you the $20 million that we still owe you, you know, because we're giving you $10 million a season. Just take the $20 million, go away. We don't want to see you anymore. We'll take this loss. Move Tevin Jenkins back over to right guard where, you know, he was going to be good. Have Darnell Wright and Tevin Jenkins play together beside each other. You have Bill Murray come in. I know it's funny saying Bill Murray because the Bears actually have a guard named Bill Murray. But you have him come in. You just figure out something on this offensive line because currently the current configuration isn't good enough. Ryan Bates isn't back yet. Doug Kramer, maybe put him in. Matt Pryor, Bill Murray. You just need someone to get in there to give Caleb Williams a little bit of protection because we saw exactly what Caleb Williams was like. He got the ball out quick. Yep. People saying that he needed to get the ball out quicker from week 1 to week 2. Well, he was the 6th quickest quarterback to do that. You can't use that argument anymore. People were still trying to use that argument this week in the national media where I'm like, what are we talking about? Dan Orlovsky, again, he had a tweet saying, oh, Romo Dunze can't get open, so Bears fans, you're just going to have to be comfortable with Caleb throwing into coverage. Romo Dunze's dad tweeted out a video of Romo Dunze getting open, and then Bears fans took that as, you know, Romo Dunze's dad saying to the Bears, like, oh, look at my son getting open. He then clarified, he's like, no, I'm just tweeting at dumbass Dan Orlovsky saying that my son can't get open. And it's one of those things where it's just, right,
it's week 2 and the frustration is already setting in. You can see it on Caleb Williams' face too. You know, like as you said, coming out of college, he was used to an O-line that was going to just collapse on him and make him do everything. The problem is he can't escape the defenders in the NFL the way he could in college. So he's getting hit a lot more. Mm-hmm. And at this point, you know, that's the tough thing for Poles is he got Caleb Williams, obviously, and then Romo Dunze fell into his lap with that 9th pick, where I think it almost would have been better if the Falcons had just taken Odunze, because then Poles could have been like, okay, we're going to take the best O-lineman in the draft instead. Yeah. You know, which almost would have been a better option, but you couldn't pass up on Rome when he dropped to that point. So that was a tough call for Poles to make. I think next year going into the draft, that is the number 1 priority, is that first round pick is being spent on the best O-lineman available, period. Yep. You know, and like you said, with looking for a center, it's, you know, it's got to be a little disappointing for Poles looking at it and seeing what the Steelers were able to snag in the 3rd round with Zach Frazier going, we passed on him, we should have grabbed him, because right now he's touted as being one of the best rookie linemen playing in Zach Frazier. He's hasn't given up pressures. He hasn't given up any sacks. Like, he has been playing well. There's been some snap issues, but that's about it.
Yeah. And so Zach Frazier, 2nd pick, 51st overall. Like that was a guy that you and I during the draft process were looking back at each other going, I want my team to draft him. And again, the Bears didn't have a 2nd round pick this year, and if they did, I look at them and say, you had some of the draft capital that you could have potentially tried to trade back up into the draft and find some of those guys.
Yeah.
In the third round, they did draft Kieran Amagaji, the tackle out of Yale. A lot of people think he can be a very good guy. He's fully practicing this week for the first time. Again, he was coming off of that knee injury that he got halfway through Yale's season last year. So at some point, I'm wondering when is he going to get in there? Hell, throw him at guard at this point. I don't care. Make sure that you have options, but I'm genuinely looking at this Bears team going, you have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds, and if the Panthers somehow manage to be the worst team in the league again this year, you're going to have the 33rd pick in the draft. You spend whatever first round pick you have, whether that's the 10th pick, whether that's the 32nd pick. Offensive lineman. You spend that first pick in the second round, offensive lineman. And then that third pick, or that second pick in the second round, offensive lineman.
Yeah.
I would not love to have 3 rookie offensive linemen out there, but goddamn, it can't be any worse than what we're seeing right now.
Well, the concern too is, I mean, it's not like the Bears haven't done that, because wasn't it 2 drafts ago where the Bears selected, I think it was 5 offensive linemen across the entire draft?
It was
so much draft
it
capital?
was 4 offensive linemen, but only 1 ended up starting.
They were all later in the draft, but it was very much the same thing where it
Yeah.
was, we need help on the O-line. Let's draft as many O-linemen as we can and hope to God one of them hits.
Well, and one of them did, as being your
Yep.
starting left tackle. And again, Braxton Jones, I've always looked at him and said, he's a guy that can play in the NFL. Is he a difference maker? No, but he can play. And like, most of my frustration from the Bears offensive line comes from the guards and the center. I don't know what Tevin Jenkins is happening right now, because I looked at Tevin Jenkins and said he's the best O-lineman on this Bears team. I thought he should have been a Pro Bowler last year. I said coming into this year, he's going to have a year coming in for a contract year where he's going to show that Pro Bowl potential. He's going to get to the Pro Bowl. I was saying all these things for the Bears. I need to see massively better play from Tevin Jenkins. Because again, in that tweet that I did, I named 2 guards and a center, because you need to move on from Nate Davis. Nate Davis is an absolute joke. That's why I initially was like, let's put Tevin Jenkins on the right side with Darnell Wright. Allow them to grow and just be run blockers together. And just allow openings to happen, because Nate Davis can't do shit. It's so utterly annoying, because not only are they not allowing time for Caleb to throw the ball, they're not opening up holes for DeAndre Sweat to go out there and run the ball. And this was a team the last 2 years that was one of the best run efficiency teams out there, and now they just can't get it done.
Yeah.
And it's so infuriating that I just don't really know what to say at this point, other than it's infuriating.
At least be good at one of the two. Either pass block well or run block well. Do at least one of those at this point.
Exactly.
And they're not doing either. It's like they're pass blocking on run plays and then they're run blocking on a passing play. It just doesn't look good. And it's concerning for Caleb Williams, because I mean, if this keeps up, he's gonna have the most pressures by the end of the season and probably the most sacks by the end of the season if it keeps on this pace, and he's gonna be beat up and sore. And you don't want to see that.
I initially had the thought of, if Caleb Williams going into week 8 of the regular season, if he has something like 30 sacks given up on him, at that point I just say, just put Tyson Bagent in for the rest of the year. And because you can't have Caleb be taking a lot of these shots. Now, again, I do think this Bears O-line will get it figured out to the point where you're not giving up 36 pressures a game.
Yeah.
I genuinely can't think that will happen.
Well, I mean, the thing to remember too with those pressures is, like, I've seen a lot of the times when he's getting sacked, it's because 3 or 4 guys are getting through the line and pressuring him.
Yeah.
And so it's not every play he's being pressured. It's just when he gets pressured, it's multiple guys.
Yeah.
And so he's just getting gangbanged back there when it happens. And then when it doesn't happen, everything's nice and smooth. He's got the time and the opening. It's just the consistency needs to come. It needs to be, don't let 3 guys through on one rush. You can't be doing that. If they can get that down to 1, then those 30 pressures become more like a 12 to 15, and that is much more manageable for a talent like Caleb Williams.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but at that point, if you're going the entire course of a game and you only allow up 15 pressures, which again, it's terrible, it's bad, but it's not 36. And
Yeah.
if Caleb Williams, he was the 6th fastest quarterback from snap to getting the ball out of his hands. The people in the draft process said, "Oh, he's going to take years to get that done." And I said, "You didn't watch his tape if you didn't realize he could do that," because people are going, "Oh, he's Mahomes, he's Mahomes." I said, "He's not. He's Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers gets the ball out of his hands quick." We saw that against a really good Texans defense, and then they were down to the point where they had to try to do a little bit more. And again, he's a rookie quarterback trying to learn the NFL, and unfortunately, he's gone up against 2 very, very good tests.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think at this moment, other than switching a few guys around in that offense of line, is once you get to trade deadline day, you just have to look at a team that has a young guy either in year 3 or year 4 that is going to have to pay one of their offensive linemen that just isn't, they're not necessarily doing well, and you just say, "Hey, we're going to give you our 2nd round pick," like the Bears, not the Panthers, because that's really, really valuable, and you just go, "Hey, we just need to do that," and pay the offensive lineman who comes in. Again, we saw that with Montez Sweat last year. You looked at it and it worked out really, really well. I have faith that Poles will potentially be able to do that again. Do I know who it's going to be? Believe me, I've looked, and there are guys out there that I would be willing to do, like Evan Neal, the tackle from the Giants, isn't currently playing right now, has dealt with injury issues, former 7th overall pick. I'm just literally at the point of going, just try anything you can. Again, for me, it all boils down to, once you get to free agency this year, you have to spend on the O-line. Like I said, you go after a Zach Martin. Yeah, sure, he's 34, 35. He's still one of the best guards in the NFL.
Well, and you're going to have the cap space to be able to pay him for 2 years to finish out his career.
Even if it's just a 1-year rental to go, listen, like, we can't get one of these, like, we've drafted a guard in the 3rd round that we really, really like, but we want him to develop over this season behind Zach Martin. Trey Smith, if you can get him from the Chiefs, this is a guy that Poles drafted. Trey Smith has been a pretty good guard for the Chiefs. And it's one of those things where you kind of look at this Chiefs offense, sooner or later, they're not going to be able to pay everyone. And you just hope that Poles, being the guy that drafted Trey Smith for KC, has seen him play. You can go, "Come on, you know me. We like each other. Come play for us. Come play for what people are calling Mahomes 2.0, which again, I still don't love that comparison, but it's, you can go do that. Go spend on a center, the best available center that comes out in free agency. I'm hoping Drew Dahlman, I believe he plays, I can't fully remember where he plays for, but I know he's been one of the top centers in the league. He's been a top 10 center these last couple of years, so you got to go get him, bring him into this squad. I have spent way too much time talking about this Chicago Bears offensive line. What else should we talk about? Because I want to cry.
I get it, man. It's tough. I feel that pain. I dealt with the last few years, that offensive line just not coming together. Bringing guys in and it not working out. That's been an issue for Pittsburgh, and it seems as though maybe they struck gold this year in the draft with Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier in Pittsburgh. Both of those guys are sort of leading this offensive line right now, despite being rookies. Fautanu has usurped that right tackle spot from last year's #1 pick, Broderick Jones, who has been struggling heavily. I talked about it in one of our other videos there, that if Broderick Jones is not committing the penalties he has been, George Pickens has well over 200 reception yards and a touchdown already this season, and Justin Fields has over 200 passing yards in a game. But he keeps committing those penalties. He got benched last week. It was midway through the first quarter. And by the look of it this week, he likely isn't even going to be playing unless somebody goes down to an injury. Broderick Jones is sort of sitting on the sideline at this point watching because something is lacking there. The rest of the O-line, we've got some injury issues. But Isaac Swamalo's out, which hurts for sure. But they've been opening up the holes for our run game in Pittsburgh, so that has been nice to see. I'd like to see more of that. Just keep that ground and pound. Also for Pittsburgh, we might finally get to see Roman Wilson this week. This is the first week he has practiced in full since his ankle injury during training camp. So I'd love to see that because maybe he does emerge and become that number 2. Because you look at what George Pickens has been able to do. If we get rid of those penalties, he has shown he can be a number 1. Because you look at the numbers, and that was up against a couple of really good cornerbacks. He can get it done as a number 1 receiver. He just needs somebody to be number 2 to sort of take some of that pressure off and then clean up those penalties. This offense in Pittsburgh needs to find a way to move the ball. It's been under 175 yards both games passing. That is not sustainable in this league. They got to find a way. I'm happy with the protection. Like, you're not giving the ball away. And this Pittsburgh Steelers team, if they win time of possession and the takeaway battles, then they win most of the games. And so far, they've been able to do that. I mentioned it in my video this week talking about the Steelers. Time of possession has been a huge turnaround for this team. Last year, they were averaging about 20 minutes a game of possession, and that is far too little.
A lot more 3-and-outs last year than opposed to this year.
Right? And it should be, like most games you look at, it should be close to 30 minutes apiece. That's how you know it's a good game, when each team has the ball for half the time. This season, we've seen the Steelers stretching out over that 30-minute mark. Whereas last season, they could barely get beyond 20 minutes. And that is why that defense was so exhausted by the time we reached week 15. If they can keep this up, at least the defense is not going to get run down like they did last year, being that they're only out on the field half the game instead of 3/4 of the game. But even so, you got to put some points up. We finally saw them get a touchdown last week to Darnell Washington of all people. That shocked, I think, everybody.
Yeah. If you were the one person who bet Darnell Washington for anytime touchdown last week, you right? are walking away with some serious cash. Just going like, yeah, sure. Like the type of person that's doing that, he's literally betting every single person to get an anytime touchdown in the game, and he's just hoping that one of the really, really lower end guys gets it, so he at least makes some profit.
Right. But no, it was just crazy. It was promising to see, though, because we've talked about the issues in the first 2 seasons of Darnell Washington and his hands. He didn't have very soft hands. He was a great run blocker, and still is.
Phenomenal.
But it was, can he become a pass catcher? And it's going to be important going into this week because Michael Pruitt is on the injured list. He is out this week. And so that basically leaves it as Pat Freiermuth number 1, Darnell Washington's into that number 2 spot, and Connor Hayward is the number 3. And so it was promising to see him be able to make a catch with his hands and not have to use his entire body to corral it. It was a nice finesse catch on the sideline. It was a huge mismatch. I mean, Darnell Washington's 6'6", 250 pounds, and he was going up against a slot corner who was like 5'10" and 180 pounds. So Darnell Washington
6'7",
pretty much could have just gone this. What was it?
He's 6'7", 264.
Yeah, Darnell Washington's huge.
Yeah.
And
he's
up
a
against
small offensive lineman is what he is.
Yeah. So that was promising. That is good going forward. And this connection, Fields and Pickens are starting to gain. It's good. They talk positively about each other off the field. They're enjoying playing together. And we haven't seen George Pickens throwing his tantrums. It's only 2 weeks, so there's still time. I know.
Still early.
But it hasn't happened yet, and that is a good thing. More good news. We saw much more of Jalen Warren last week, no longer dealing with that hamstring injury of his. He was not on a pitch count last week, and we saw that. He was touching the ball more, he was getting some yards. And I think this week, that's what we're going to see is this Steelers offense look to those two running backs and go, look, tire this defense out. Tire them out completely so that when we do throw the ball, our O linemen don't feel the need to be grabbing and tugging at jerseys just to give Justin Fields enough time to sling it downfield to Pickens.
Yeah.
You know, and if they can do that, it's great. I said it earlier this week. If those two running backs can combine for over 100 yards a week, the Steelers can have half the possession and they can win the takeaway battle every week. They will be in a good position to win every single week. I don't care if you're playing the Panthers or the Chiefs. If you can do those three things, you're going to have a chance to win against teams even as good as the Chiefs. And so that is a key going forward. And Justin Fields is just getting better. I know his stat line doesn't show it, but watching him play, he's getting more comfortable and he's having fun. You know, that last season in Chicago, you could see it. He was not having fun playing football. You know, he was losing that because I think he knew the writing was on the wall. He knew his time was coming to an end and he was still getting hit so many times. He's having fun again. And I think that is a key for Justin Fields. He needs to be having fun out there for him to be productive.
Yeah, it's yeah, I don't really have any notes on that. I think the one difference, the one thing that I would say is Justin Fields, the hits that he was taking, I would say it was like 75-25 Justin Fields taking those hits as opposed to the offensive line giving it up, because at the end of the day, Caleb Williams, he is getting hit because the offensive line is allowing him to get hit. While Justin Fields, he puts himself in positions to get hit. And again, you match that up with a bad offensive line that doesn't, it's not a recipe for success. It is just such a it's good to see that he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
If you are the Steelers though, going from 18 points to 13 points against what was arguably a worse defense in the Broncos, and now you're going up against this Chargers team that is playing with all the confidence in the world with their wackadoodle head coach who has things going right now. But one of the things that I want to talk about is the NFL right now. They are slowly transforming back into that run first league. Again, we've seen the passing just take off these last couple of years. Mel Kiper earlier this week, he had a thing where he said, the double high safety should be outlawed in the league. It's like, Mel, what are you talking about? You're 1,000 years old at this point. Like,
well, and
it's so
that
dumb.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
That argument, double high safety should be outruled. It's like, well, no. Teams are realizing that you've got Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. You've got guys like Tyreek Hill. You've got guys like Xavier Worthy now, where it's like you need those two high safeties, or it's going to be teams scoring 70 points a game.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we're starting to see is the defensive had begun adjusting and going, okay, teams are just balling out. They're airing it out. We need to get that safety help back there again. You know, we can't just be putting 8 guys in the box every time trying to get after the quarterback because they're getting it out fast enough. And so now you're making these quarterbacks hold on to the ball longer because they have to wait for the plays to develop. And we're starting to see who the fraud quarterbacks are because of that. You know, and then the offense has to shift and go, well, look, we got to run the ball more because we got to find a way to bring these defenses back up to the line of scrimmage because they're all backing off now. And it's great. We can throw, Luke Getsy plays every down and we can make completions for 1.5 yards. That doesn't get you first downs.
No.
And then it ends up being a 3 and out. And so it's the chess match is developing, which I think for myself, I'm glad to see because it was getting a little bit too Wild West for me with the way teams were slinging the ball down the field, especially with the type of offense my team has had in years recent. I'm like, oh boy, we can't keep up with 35 points a game. Like we're a score 18 points a game and win type of team.
Yeah, I love the high scoring passing offense in the league. We all know I'm an air raid type of guy. I love those style of things, but at the end of the day, Mel Kiper saying, "Oh, too high safety should be illegal." It's like, no, dude. It's the smart defensive player or smart defensive play callers going, "You know what the trend shows when there's double high safety? Guess what? The big explosive plays drop dramatically." And
Yep.
when you're a defensive coordinator or a defensive play caller, your job is to simply go out there and say, "We do not want the big explosive play to happen."
Yep. Chunk plays kill you.
Chunk plays kill you. But as someone who's an offensive minded guy, my philosophy has always been, I'm going to kill you with 1,000 paper cuts, because those style of offenses will always work.
Yeah.
They will never go out of style, because if I can have a 12 play drive that ends in a touchdown, well, guess what? I don't need the big chunk plays. When we play Madden against each other, or when we play NCAA against each other, the biggest thing that we've always talked about is I never go for the big, long chunk plays. It's, I'm going to get 4 plays. I'm going to get 4 yards on this play. I'm going to get 4 yards on that play. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I just move my offense entirely down the field. That will never be stopped at the end of the day. Like, that will always be a recipe for success, as opposed to, I'm just going to throw the ball down the field to my speedy wide receiver and he's going to do that. Don't get me wrong, I love those plays. I love those plays too, but I'm not going to have that every single down.
No, exactly. That's where, once you've worked the defense into the corner you wanted, then you play that. Or, as often happens, it's 2-minute drill, down by 4. You have to go for those big plays, and that's when those defenses that are designed to run that way really thrive. And that's where, again, as long as Pittsburgh can have the lead with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, they're going to get a lot of turnovers and win a lot of games that way, because that is how they're designed, is to get pressure on the quarterback to force him into making a mistake and throw it to one of the secondaries.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing with the Bears right now. Like, again, we have talked about the similarities between our teams for years and years and years. Of pretty much the only difference between our two teams is your team won a coin toss years ago that gave you a Hall of Fame quarterback, and then you were able to find one a few years, back in the early 2000s that just ended up working. Other than those two things, the Bears and Steelers are basically the same franchise.
Yep.
Hard-nosed defense, run the ball. We're going to kill you with our defense, and we're going to hurt you with our running game. And then you've just been fortunate enough to get some quarterbacks over that time. But so yeah, both of us are viewing the same thing. And
that's what concerns me about your Bears with Swift right now, is he has not been able to get it going running. And that's a big concern for me, because they brought him in.
To me, that's the offensive line. That's the offensive line.
Well, it may be, but I mean, whether that's the offensive line or that's on Swift, either way, like, that needs to change. Because 100%. Again, I look at my Pittsburgh Steelers, and both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are averaging over 4 yards per carry, which is beautiful, because that tells you, if you need to, you can run it 3 downs and get a first down every time. Right, and that will chew the clock.
I'm in total agreement. You need to have your run game going, because that is going to allow your team to be able to move the ball. And again, I always look at this. The best way to set up your passing game is with a lethal running game, because again, once you have that run game consistently going, all that does is it forces the safeties to come a little bit in. Maybe you have a safety going into the box to help the linebackers out. It goes from having a 6-person box to having an 8-person box to having a 9-person box, and then that opens up the passing game. Again, I go back to us playing Madden against each other. I always go, I'm going to destroy you with my running game in the first half, and that opens up my passing game, because you have to be worried about that. And those are the situations that happen. And
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in the running game for the Bears. DeAndre Swift. I don't know why we haven't been running Roshan Johnson. He's been one of my like last year. He was my favorite back to watch run the ball because of how efficient he was. And hopefully
I
this
think
week
it's
it
'cause
just
they
gets it
spent so
going.
much on Swift. They have to use him.
Well, I will say with Roshan, he was hurt for week number 1, and so he like this was kind of the first week that he's been fully healthy coming back. So I will give them a little bit of that leeway. So I'm hoping we see a little bit more. But yeah, I can't agree with you more. The running game needs to improve for the Bears because if they have 1 yard per rush attempt, that is not good enough.
No, even 2. It's got to be a minimum of 3. So you're setting yourself up with a 3rd and short every time if you can. You know, that's where like a lot of people are down on Pittsburgh, and I get it. I'm not happy with how much we've been scoring, but how the run game has been developing so far, that is so promising because all it takes, as I've said, is stop the penalties and Justin Fields connecting with Pickens a little bit more, and all of a sudden, this offense gets rolling. You know, they need to still find a wide receiver too.
Yes.
That is what it comes down to. Maybe Roman Wilson this week. There's been talks of multiple teams around the league that the Steelers have been looking at possibly trading for one. I know Adam Thielen from the Panthers was one that they were talking about maybe bringing in. John Mechie from the Texans, who now is sitting as like the number 4 or 5 on that depth chart, who is extremely talented. That would be a good pickup. You know, the days of looking for a wide receiver 1 are over. That's not happening. You got to trade for a wide receiver 2 at this point because Van Jefferson, sure, he shows some flashes. Same with Calvin Austin, but there's no consistency there for either of them.
Yeah, it's the big problem for the Steelers right now is that you're not going to be trading for any of those guys until probably closer to trade deadline, which again, it's really unfortunate that you're probably going to have to watch for that. But yeah, I think the Steelers will eventually trade for a wideout. It's just going to be probably a little bit of time before we actually get there.
Yeah.
Which it's same thing for my Bears with an offensive lineman. I have a feeling they will end up trading for an old lineman. It's just probably going to take a while before that actually ends up happening. But honestly, I don't really have anything more to chat with you here on this particular podcast. Again, one of the things that we're doing is we're breaking up a bunch of our content. That way, again, this is only going to be about an hour for us, which I think is nice to have some of these conversations. And then we're not having the actual game picks there, which again, that takes well above an hour for us to do. And breaking it up for multiple videos. We have another recording that we're going to be doing here in a little bit. But for Sterling, I'm Brendan. Thank you all very much for watching the OneIQ Football Talk podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment on the video as it really helps out our channel. But till next time, for Sterling, I'm Brendan saying peace.